Good morning, Trumptopia. A special segment of the Almost Daily Zencast. Hosted by the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. Let's talk Trump.
Howdy, folks. Thanks for tuning in. Let's kick off the show with a Trumptopia fun fact. As of yesterday, to the best of my understanding, and my limited capacity to double check on this, the current statistic, as calculated by 3 different independent fact checkers and reported by a couple of different media outlets and now redistributed by all of them, and of course quickly will be dismissed as nothing but just another bit of fake news by the alt-extreme right and Trumptopian hardcore Trumpsters. But as of yesterday, the rest of us who kind of think that at least the fact checkers are probably actually fact-checking the facts, and that it isn't an absolutist, hardcore, totalitarian control over our media outlets that the evil corporate war profiteers exercise at this time. Given all that, as of yesterday, 8,158 lies in 2 years from the sitting president in office. A world record, my friends. I think. I could be wrong. I'm speculating here. I'm totally kind of talking out of my speculative bunghole when I say that that is probably the most lies that any politician in modern history has been fact-checked on and, you know, just openly spewed to be debunked in his first 2 years in office. That's the best. Hashtag MAGA. Let's make politicians liars again. That's, what's that? It'd be MPLA. Mamplola. That doesn't roll off the tongue. Not as sweet and sexy as MAGA. So, MAGA hats, MAGA controversies. Let's go right to, where are we? Oh, I screwed up my thing. Okay, let's go right to this overreaction to the MAGA hat wearing kid and the menacing, drum beating medicine man. Dear friends and listeners on all sides of the political spectrum, this, to me, and I'm being honest and genuine, and I've already been accused by someone who I thought was kind of in tune and of similar opinion politically as I am, but I guess, you know, there's so much bifurcation that even those we think we agree with are out there looking for something to disagree with by default. And generally, I get accused of that all the time, that, oh, you're just being contrary and argumentative. But I think I'm pretty consistent about what I suggest as alternative. The definition of being just contrary is when, I disagree with something. Okay, great. Do you disagree because you disagree, or do you disagree because of a set of reasons that make sense and you can explain to me right now that provide an alternative set of ideas, proposals, and ultimately action? Or are you just saying, no, you are wrong because I disagree? That's contrarianism. To just be like, I've listened to your idea and I think it is wrong because I disagree with the morality, with some abstraction, right? Because I can't, but to not have a response that includes, I think a good alternative would be blah, 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 steps 3, 4, and 5, then you're just sort of saying no to say no, I think. And I don't typically believe that I go around saying no to people just to say no. If I'm responding in person or in social media format to someone and saying, hold on a second, I would like to humbly disagree with your assertion here, I usually have a paragraph or two to share about why I can't agree with that statement and in what way I want to disagree. Do I think it's false? I can disagree with something that I think is true, right? Isn't that possible? Like, the sky is blue. Yes, I disagree. But to me, it looks kind of slate gray because I had a lot of eyeball damage as a child staring at the sun. That's just a random example, not a factual statement about my youth. I digress. This episode is quite interesting to me, despite my accusations against me of just whitewashing, of being a snowflake, not wanting to have an opinion, of not wanting to offend others. I've never worried about those things, folks. Sidebar, along this kind of thinking, and I don't ever want to post this literally as text I enter into Facebook because I don't need a reason to go to Facebook jail, and that sounds like one more than anything, but I have a lot of friends that are radical thinkers, Facebook friends, not real life friends. I use Facebook very selectively for those who are new to the show, and I save room for real life theater friends, like people I meet during the course of my professional day-to-day working as a theater professional. But most of the majority of my Facebook ads are people who add me, who approach me saying, hey, I want to add you on the interwebs because they've seen something that I've posted, etc. The way it works. So I don't generally add a lot of people myself. I don't usually go out of my way unless I see someone who I really am interested in, like, because they share or they post things that are of interest to me, whether it's like exact thinking or not, whether it's similar thinking or not. But that's rare, right? Like, usually I just let that hang. My point is, it's fascinating when I get backlash, and from whom I get backlash, and it's intriguing. And with this issue, I think that it's the most current example of precisely where I've been trying to indicate that our socio-political identity, ego, echo chamber systems are trying to drive us to. This fervor of virulent confrontarianism about increasingly meaningless things. For example, if this had happened in my youth, in the days, and I want to say I have a personal set of, I want to acknowledge that I have some personal set of baggage, bias, influence, context influence, because this was a big group of kids from a Catholic high school. Excuse me. And I'll have to edit that in post. And whenever, which may not even happen to the summer because I totally lagged on doing any of those edits over winter break. Apologies, fans. I will, though, eventually, at some point, go through all the... I think I may have been wrong and mistaken about having reached the 100th episode, but that's a whole nother issue. But I want to go through and edit all my episodes, not to alter any of the content, but just to cut out the bits where I like brain fart and or hiccup and sneeze or fart or whatever, you know. But I may just leave them raw because it is sort of who I am. I'm just me, and I ramble in spirally fractal patterns. I have a personal set of baggage about this incident because I have a strong, weird, interesting, nostalgic connection to being a Catholic high school student, and I get it. That comes with a lot of negative projections and a lot of real-life negative connections. Projections and connections are different things, folks. Check yourself before you go asserting one for the other. Let's put a pin in that. We'll come back to it. I also have lots of deep, strong, personal, real-life connections to all indigenous peoples, and mind you, even like Western colonialist Caucasians ultimately were indigenous peoples at one point, and we have to remember that. But when we're talking about the way in which we choose to live and the way we self-identify and the way in which, beyond that of our like bodily features, right? Like the whole, to insert a quick pinned sidebar of a future episode, hopefully, the whole Pocahontas Elizabeth Warren thing is another example of just like, let's whip everybody up, give them a reason to get frustrated, annoyed, exhausted, angry, and argumentative because we've already programmed them to be that way, and then they can just fight about this issue, and it really doesn't solve anything. But we'll come back to that at another time, because I have a lot of things to say about that. But I personally can be, throughout my life, in person, by both Caucasians or white Americans, regardless of their tolerance or intolerance. I have been mocked for my statement of being a native-born Mexican, which I genuinely, truthfully am. I was born in Mexico City. My mother and father were born in the country of Mexico in very different cities, and we go far back. And we immigrated here very legally. So before I get any crazy hate mail from the extreme right or any racist-ass bullshit from anybody who doesn't like illegal immigration. And we're going to get to that in this episode, by the way, if I don't spiral out of control with the ramblings and have to cut short. Because these two examples are sitting right side by side to each other and have this connection. We have, okay, but let me come back. I have a deep, personal, nostalgic, and I use that word to indicate that I get that there's a sort of mind context there that's separate from the facts, right? But also real and visceral and factual connection to indigenous peoples, because through my native-born Mexicanness, although I do indeed have a lot of Spanish influence, I have a lot of, much deeper, in my personal opinion, roots to the indigenous side of my family, because although it's easy to say, oh, you've been whitewashed, in that, like, pejorative race relations, you're mixed, but you pass for white, so you might as well be white, so you might as well be criticized for not being your original ethnicity, although claiming it, whatever. This is all interconnected, folks, in a bunch of different ways. My point being, I think that it's fair of me to say that I can relate to both of the two faces in that now iconic and, I should have made a cool little doodle of that for this episode. Why didn't I? I'll do it for the social media postings soon. I just didn't think to snag that image and do a little derivative artwork on it yet, but I will probably later today. I digress. Maybe I'll replace it once I get to it, and I just have a placeholder for now. All these things. Why do I have this, like, internal, like, production manager talk in my head that I really wish I could just... I wish I was ambidextrous enough that my one hand could be typing notes about what I am thinking, separate from what my mouth is saying, but I can't, because my hands are actually more like sculptor puppet hands, and if my mouth is saying something, my hand wants to puppeteer it. And if this were a live webcam podcast, you'd see that I'm literally waving my hand around like Kermit the Frog, as if I had a Kermit the Frog puppet on it, which I don't, but I do own one. It's just in a box somewhere, and it's mouthing. My hand is literally mouthing the words that I say. One of the versions of my show that I wanted to do was a puppet show, but I thought that's exhausting, and I don't have the production time or budget or team, because then I could have, like, multiple puppets, right? And I have a friend who does puppetry, and I tried to pitch him the idea, but he was really caught up in a whole of the show, and I'm not shit-talking him. I'm lamenting that it was the wrong timing, and I had to respect that. And not that I had to respect that. I'm not lamenting that. I'm lamenting that it was the wrong timing for him. But shout out to any puppeteers who are randomly listening to this and who want to collaborate with puppet heads and make a puppet newscast. I did it with I have to acknowledge and honor another friend who definitely was down to do that, and that it wasn't the right timing for me. Two different incidences. I apologize to both. Should they ever happen to listen to this episode and recognize themselves, my sincerest apologies. I'm not trying to poke any bears, but I digress. So, let's clarify. Sorry if that's too loud in your earphones there. I don't mean it to. Sprecher doesn't give me I don't know how to use it in such a way that I can fine-tune the volume on things like that. And I don't have a pre-recorded one that I can adjust before I play it ready. And I will soon, so that I don't have to play it live and blow your eardrums out. Because I do believe in taking a moment. And that bell for me in real life, whether my mouth keeps rambling or not, does help clarify my brain. Let me put it to you this way. I realized while sort of having my initial response inspirational moment of like, oh my God, someone I'm connected to has a really interesting take on this, and I got to respond. I realized, and also in commenting on some of my own things, on social media, I realized there's two simple icons, and not to reduce things to a duality, but put a pin in this, folks. Whenever you see two polar opposites, please remember that despite them being opposites, in the universe, the following is always true. Duality and non-duality coexist. They always coexist. They may not always be right within eyesight of each other in terms of our ability to perceive them, but they always coexist. And that has deep implications that we usually generally neglect because we don't think about it at all. There are two striking icons in this now iconic hallmark image of this epoch that we live in. And that's the MAGA hat, obviously, right? And this indigenous leader's drum. The most fascinating thing about all of the clusterfuck of radical reactionary statements of both of support and then judgment and sort of chastisement to whoever the perceived bad guy is, and of like just angry reactionary, all of this is bullshit sort of judgment of both sides. The most interesting set of comments that have floated in that turmoil of frothy, echo chamber driven, I think, anger talk, talking past each other on the social medias and in person about it, is that the MAGA hat represents the worst of Trump's possible perceptive ways of perceiving Trump. MAGA now to some people is just quite literally a really violent trigger of radical anger, and to some people even the beginnings of hate speech and more and worse in reaction against it, right? Because it represents so many things and so many mixed messages and so many horrible actual messages as presented by those who support the icon. Similarly, there's this presumed and projected set of assumptions, such as anybody wearing a MAGA hat is a racist. Anybody wearing a MAGA hat supports everything Trump thinks. Now, let's pause here for a second. These were high school kids. I don't know about you, but I seem to remember a very distinct capacity that however politically engaged we might have been trying to be in high school, we really didn't have the time, capacity, or wherewithal, or experience, or background knowledge to really know or have well-formed conclusions about what was going on. Okay? And I think I say that as a general and inclusive statement because we are all our most aspirational and our most moronically absent-minded and neglectful and unaware in high school. And that's all a big mix of being all the things we can possibly be. And let's just own that. Like in high school, we're silly and crazy and not always the wildest, the most interesting and self-aware. Oh, that doesn't do anything. Sorry. I just was intrigued that there was a new button in the Sprecher interface, and I've got to do it at a time when I have my login credentials for Facebook. And I don't know why that's showing up in chat, but anyways, interesting choice, Sprecher. I digress. So that was my point. So that image, that icon, loaded and maybe overanalyzed, and there's hyper enthusiasm in the pro and the against side. So, right, a lot of things automatically get put on these kids. And a lot of questions that weren't asked, like, why were so many of those kids from a Catholic high school? Excuse me. I suddenly got the acid reflux indigestion. I love coffee, but I shouldn't be drinking it in the middle of my podcast. Almost burp. To totally interrupt the flow of the professionalism in my podcast here. This is what I mean when I'm like, I need to edit that out and post. Like, I don't need that. You don't need to listen to that. I digress. Questions. Questions that I don't see being asked. I'm sure are being asked because I'm not the only person that could be thinking this, right? I'm just bringing it to my circle of audience and friends because I haven't seen it floating around yet. And I want to encourage others out there to question beyond the typical scope of questions that have been asked. Why were they wearing them? Why did so many of these Catholic high school kids have a MAGA hat? Is that Catholic high school really that conservative and potentially sort of creepy in their conservatism? I don't know. Lots of people point out that apparently the population, the student body at that school has a bad rap. And maybe they do live in a really sort of not progressive, anti-progressive, hyper-conservative community. But my point here about assumptions and projections is that at the surface, first impression, and when this phenom, because that's what it is, right? It's like, it's a moment, an event in time that captures the minds and imaginations of people and suddenly carries a meaning to groups of people that is bigger than what may have actually been going on, I think. I wasn't there, right? And the first flash in the pan, everybody who was commenting wasn't also there. I don't even think that the original poster of the video, the person who first posted that video with a slant commentary spin, with whatever the Twitter account it was that got banned over it, they weren't there. The kids who were seen videotaping it, I don't know if they posted instantly, how many of them were live streaming, but what we can look back now already with the little bit of hindsight that we can get at this point and realize that initial flash in the pan was slanted and that it got picked up by multiple outlets that clearly work under the influence of the multiple echo chamber system, and that the spin got spun, right? Various left-leaning commentators took this story and made it about the MAGA hat and about the obvious disrespectful intent behind the smirking kid's smile. Now, you're a better man or person than me if you can intuitively and assuredly and with absolute accuracy and 100% perfection every time correctly interpret a teenager's smirky dumb fuck face. I'm sorry to all teenagers. I was a smirky dumb fuck teenager at one point. What I'm saying is, hold your horses if you think you can just... I saw one post that took it to this level. That it was the smirking kid's face with the Native American elder cut out. And I can't remember his name now, but it was that one creepy, like, stoic perma smirk. I think he was either a rapist or a murderer, like a serial murderer that had been on trial for a while and was a sensational trial a few years back. And it doesn't matter really who he was or what the case was. Only like the murderer fanatics are going to nerd out about me not having that information to prove my point. My point was, that was the purpose, that was the level of projected criminality that was being associated to this kid. And the summary caption from the originator of whoever seemed to have posted that meme, the meme itself had no image. I wish I'd screenshotted that, but I was not quite fully awake yet. In terms of literally, first thing I saw in the morning. And the implication was like, if you can't read or interpret or discern, I forget which word was used quite there, but if you can't see the malice intent in these two smirks, and something's wrong with you and fuck you for defending blah, 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 right? But it's like the implicit judgment there that seems to be projected onto this kid is he's as evil as this other smirking sociopathic multiple murderer. And I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. Hold your horses, folks. Stop patting yourselves on the back that hard. No one can read faces that good. Yes, trust your instincts. But also, check your voice in your head. Is it really your gut instincts, or is it the echo chamber that's been trying to hijack the way your brain thinks and interprets your instincts? Okay? There was definitely tension. The first thing I witnessed of that incident that I chose to watch was the short length. It was just the up close drumming and the kid not moving. And I didn't know who it approached to first. I couldn't tell. I couldn't quite make out what the chanting was. There was just sort of general crowd roar. And then there was the drumming. So let's move on to that icon. The drum. The other half of that, like, silliest thing I've seen in this virulent foam of reactionary hate being spewed at all directions at everybody else for not understanding what was going on in this clash, in this disrespect of everybody disrespecting each other, was the characterization of this senior citizen, to start at the baseline. Like, the simplest way you can describe this gentleman, this older man, is a senior citizen. And I don't know him. I don't know much beyond the initial sets of images. I haven't seen him otherwise. But arguably, this teenager is in better shape than the senior citizen. But that's not my point. My point is, he's characterized as maliciously intimidating and aggressively threatening with his drum. Now, that's, to me, as redonkulous and as absurd of a set of assumptions or conclusions or misinterpretations of his actions as what we could wildly project onto a kid standing there smirking, not moving, making direct eye contact, wearing a MAGA hat. Now, I understand that even in the shortest of those clips, there can be heard other people making all kinds of statements, and there's a general confrontational sort of multi-protests protesting each other, crowd noise. But in terms of what's actually going on between those two people, I think the reason this incident went so viral and was so overreacted to was because that initial image is a blank slate kind of image. It's tension charged. There's a lot of tension in it. There's clearly a lot of something going on between those two human individuals, but decontextualized as it was, even though the person, the original post and some of the first waves of reactions set a tone, the image itself was like this strange Rorschach blot, open-ended, easy to project onto mirror, like reflective surface, shiny object, meme of two people engaged in nonverbal something, a deep and intense nonverbal something. But to get back to this Native American leader, or maybe dare I say, I could be wrong, I don't know what his formal tribal lineage or titleage might be, but to me, it isn't too disrespectful, I don't think, to say that he could be looked at as a shaman or a healer. And it must be, here's where I'm driving to, that image of that drum that was being threateningly drummed at that kid, whether he is literally his tribe's medicine man or not, anyone can go and research and find out that one of the most primary and important uses of drumming and chanting and drumming rituals that's ubiquitous in indigenous peoples, especially here in North America, but kind of throughout the world, one of the primary, it's not the only, but one of the primary uses or intents of drumming as a tool, as a spiritual tool, as a ritual tool, is, in fact, healing. So, the absurdity of this implied and automatically assumed and knee-jerked, presumed to be accurate assumption that this Native American elder was being threatening to this guy is on its face as silly as any projection about how virulently racist that kid might be. Now, did he participate in what I've been told is part of the track record of his Catholic school's bad behavior of, painting himself up in blackface and other examples of mocking people of other races? I don't know. I can't, and I don't have the time to go verify. I have a theater job to go attend to. And for those of you curious, when I say theater job, I don't mean movie theater. Not that I judge people who work at movie theaters. I just don't want to be judged as someone who works at a movie theater by those who do judge people who work in movie theaters, because I don't. I work in a live theater, and I'm quite content and proud and satisfied with that day job, and I respect it immensely. But it's got nothing to do with my podcast. But it constrains my ability to capture all the things I want to capture on the podcast. I digress. I've rambled long enough. These two things are examples I'd actually like to come back to and share with you some more formal and structured thoughts that I shared on social media about this and another example of our current cultural climate of overreaction. And that's the issue of illegal immigration and Trump's wall. The hat, right? Transition right there. One of the earliest of campaign promises. Ideologically driven, question mark? In other words, is it a tool of xenophobia and exclusionary, racist population control? Is it just an ideological cheese puff? Is it just, a carrot? Or maybe a carrot would be the better. Cheese puff is funnier sounding, but carrot, at least they're both orange, right? Thematic tie-in to the great Orange Dawn. Is it an ideological cheese puff carrot that is dangled before the base in order to whip up xenophobic sentiment? Or is it literally an infrastructure project that's going to save our economy? Question mark. I don't know. But you know what question isn't being asked, or at least I'm not really seeing, all my usual disclaimers pinned right there about when I say that kind of thing. And that's this. This question is being rejected. And when I brought this question to the table, the knee-jerk response is usually, you're a fucking idiot, you're insane, all immigrants are evil. If I may present in reductionist terms my summary of the sentiment presented. But that's the question that triggers that sort of reaction, especially from anti-illegal immigration advocates. Immigration advocates are like, that's confusing and possible, but really I just want to help the immigrants, generally speaking. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to help the immigrants. Jesus was down with helping the immigrants. I think I've already done a whole episode about that, but my memory might be fooling me. I maybe have just planned an episode about that. So stay tuned. But here it is. Here's this question. If I may spiral to it out of controlledly and then boom, right on the nose. To anyone concerned with illegal immigrants taking American jobs and how to solve the problem, and mind you, this is where I'm drawing a line of discernment that I think is lacking from the overall conversation. Is your issue with the immigrants or with the actual causation of the problem? If your concern is with the immigrants, you might want to check if you're a racist, or a xenophobe at least. Xenophobes technically aren't racists, but they do feel are all others from without their comfort zone of ethnic identity. They don't necessarily hate and want to destroy them all, but it's a slippery slope of ego trap right into that fucking oven of delights. Was that a horrible reference? I don't know. That just what came out of my mouth. I apologize if that was offensive. But here's the question I'm trying to get out of my mouth. If you, as an anti-illegal immigrant self-identifier, if you really want to solve the problem, right? If you identify with wanting to solve the problem of immigration / illegal immigration, because that's just two different conversations, right? Because what is the problem with immigration? Nothing, except you might say that there's too much immigration. And then at that level of nuance, as we get to regular immigration and whether or not there's a problem and whether or not it's a broken system, a similar response from my perspective applies. It's just adjusted to that nuance. So let's come back to just illegal immigration. Do you really want to solve that problem? Do you actually, for realsies, want to solve that problem instead of bullshit and spew hate at others that look different than you and are coming from countries you don't know and have never been to? Then here is the solution. Hold the corporations that are willing to pay shit wages to undocumented workers accountable. Because those corporations, those American corporations that are here in America, run by your fellow Americans, would rather pay undocumented immigrants shit wages in order to make more profit. Now, I know profit is what Western society and all of our thinking is founded on, so that rings alarm bells to everyone from free marketers to Jesus wants me to be rich Christians. But set aside all those alarm bells for a hot second and just stop and think. If this is a free market driven economy, if the free market, not regulated market, bullshit, not free market at all, if this is a market driven economy, then this is a supply side problem. Let me say that again. If this is a market driven society, then this is a supply side problem. You've got dirty players in the market willing to criminally subvert the economic system that is designed to give Americans a living opportunity, right? A living wage, and they are willing to divert their responsibility to the law in order to keep more money for themselves and invest it in ways that are profitable to the corporation and not the people they employ. And they cause this vacuum suck. If no corporation at all, anywhere, ever in America, if no one individual, if no billionaires who own, golf clubs in Florida and New Jersey and towers in New York, hired illegal immigrants in order to save money on their labor costs, then a shit ton fewer, especially all the crazy desperate ones, the ones that you really don't like the most, would come here from other countries. A shit ton fewer people would risk their lives to come here. Why? Because we wouldn't have the kinds of opportunities. We'd also be a very different country in terms of, okay, what happens after we hold these corporations accountable? How do we then translate that into our social ideas or ideals and our behavioral ideals? But I hope you see my actual point, right? Like, there's all this hubbub about the wall. There's all this anger being thrown back and forth in all directions from all quarters. And no one's asking, why aren't we at least addressing the culpability, the literal criminal culpability of hiring illegal immigrants? The reason, why are they illegal? The people themselves are not illegal. The crime of getting into the country without documentation in and of itself is not even a very major crime. The real crime is that they get sucked into slave labor wage work by American corporations that do not want to pay American citizens a livable wage. That's the real problem. Shut that bullshit down, and I trust you, more immigrants will come here legally because our federal government will have more revenue to fund more programs to facilitate that. And also, those immigrants, those ones that are desperate and come for all the desperation jobs that are better paying jobs than what they've got going on at home, will look at this country and go, well, there are no desperation jobs. I'll have a hard time finding work there. I'll go to another country. Or better yet, I'll innovate in my own and radically change things. Now, there's a third level of responsibility where we as Trumptopians, Americans, and exotic foreigners who live here amongst you must all collectively take responsibility for in terms of holding those who are actually responsible accountable. And that's our own shady-ass federal government for fucking with the cultural stability of other countries in a bunch of different ways, both here domestically by fucking with the peoples who live here from those countries, and abroad through all the various ridiculous ways in which U.S. foreign policy, both above board and maybe not so much above board, fucks with other countries' political and economic stability. But that's an episode for another day, folks. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. Remember, when it boils down to it, especially here in the United States, no human being deserves to be belittled and reduced to illegality as a living illegal thing on stolen land. This country has still yet to cope with and heal from its abusive, corrupt foundations, and all the lineage of and heritage of hate, xenophobia, corruption, abuse, profiteering, and etc., etc., etc. All the sins of our country are festering, and not so much below the surface anymore, folks. And I don't want to start sounding like a Catholic, because I'm not. And there's several episodes you can jump around and listen to, the ones that seem to indicate or catch your attention or whatever. But throughout various episodes, I talked about where I am on a spiritual worldview. I respect people of faith. I reject organized religions, as ultimately all of them are, to some level or another, not absolutely in the same way, but in a sort of relativistic sense, all kind of equally corrupt and arguably hijacked by those who profiteer on conflict. That's why my Facebook profile picture was "They profiteer on conflict" just a few days ago. But more stuff to talk about, as always. And as always, thank you, friends, for tuning in. Please, please, please share your thoughts, your reactions, your questions, your suggestions. I, as always, will warn you now that I have a very nuanced and particular way of dealing with hate speech. So if you're going to bring the hate speech, brace yourself. But if you have sincere, genuine, honest, non-hate-filled questions, thoughts, concerns, arguments against or for any of the things I've discussed and any of the points of view that I point out and or criticize, bring it, post it, share it, like it. Tap the things on the tappy bits with the computer bits. Why? Because I am an earnest and sincere, concerned citizen of this universe, and I would like to, a la many inspirational artists that have come before me, transition from the delightful and respectable day job in one aspect of the entertainment field that I have enjoyed up until now, into a more independent and sort of creative version of being a professional entertainment professional. So to that end, help me out. It's still technically my birthday month, and the one thing I ask for my birthday, dear friends and listeners and followers on instant media, is on instant social grams, is that you share my podcast at 3 people in your social networks. Someone who may possibly hate the show, someone who might at first be somewhat indifferent to the show because they're sort of not into any of the subject matter, and someone who you think might actually dig what I'm talking about and get it already, or be drawn to it even though they aren't as overtly philosophically transcendental and anti-ideological as myself. But I digress. I will return to these 2 subjects to literally read to you some things that I wrote, because I didn't even get into those details in my off the top of my head rambling now. And I have got to get booking on to the next thing. May peace, love, and grooviness blossom in your hearts, my friends. And as that happens, pay it forward. It's what will solve our problems, is understanding that our problems are piddlywink, nonsense, imaginary, compared to the power of transformative forgiveness and healing and unconditional love. Even for the bad guys, as hard of a pill as that is to swallow, folks, especially on the personal level, I get it. I know personally people that I have a really challenging time coping with, and they haven't even done that horrible things to me. And I have some people that have done some really horrible things to me, and I have made those same horrible transactional mistakes to do horrible things to others. We are all guilty at some level or another, and we can all either beat ourselves up for it or start healing. We can keep beating each other up for all the horrible things going on in the world, or we can start healing. If you're curious about how, there is the simplest of initial steps, my friends, and that's the age-old wisdom that's been handed down to us again and again by mystic and shaman and healer and I hate it when words fall out of my brain before I get to use them in the order I'd like to use them. Midwife, and witchy woman, and magician of every type and variety, and prophet, true genuine prophets, were just folks who were into this kind of self-investigatory, self-transformative work. And that's this, my friends. To change the world, be the change you want to be in the world. If we're talking about healing, then be the healing you want to see in the world. And how can you be the healing if you want to see in the world? Start by healing yourself. If I may humbly suggest, that is as easy and as hard as it sounds. But that's why I'm here, folks, to be your almost daily support, motivational speaker and social commentarian, and hopefully one day actual entertainment show co-host with several other interesting, diversely minded folks, all of us unified in one objective, which is to genuinely solve the problems that we face in the world instead of kicking the can down the road vis-a-vis echo chamber driven, distractionary conflation of conflict and profiteering. All right, I'll stop rambling at you folks, and I will come back at you soon with more.
And that is the latest madness from behind the orange wall. Thank you for listening to GMT, a special segment of the Almost Daily Zencast. Stay woke, Trumptopia. Stay woke.